Hi everyone, and thanks again for joining our recurring release webinar, this time for the FinDock May release. For everybody who doesn't know me, my name is Stefan. I'm the product manager at FinDock, and we will take this time to walk together over the FinDock May 21 release, highlight to you the relevant updates, and also have a nice demo prepared for you as well. Obviously, in case of any questions, please feel free to ask them during the session, making use of the chat or the Q&A function of the webinar. And otherwise, if you have a question later, you can feel free to reach out to me in this case, and I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. Before we delve into the contents of this release, please be aware that everything that we are going to share with you today is already available to you in your sandboxes. So it's already there for you to play with, or to experiment with, or to test with, and then it will go it will be pushed to your production environments on Sunday evening, May the 16th. So in about a week. As an overview for this release, we'd like to go over the payment schedule upgrades that we made again in this release. The auto collect pilot we started and told you about last release as well, but we made great improvements there, and we'll also be demoing you how we now also with FinDock can do automated recurring payment collection, the data validation pilot, and we will highlight some relevant or obvious bugs and enhancements improvements we made as part of this release. To get everybody on the same page, as you know, currently already for a couple of releases, we are focusing much of our efforts and attention to improving recurring payment collection with FinDock. And over the course of the last releases, that we have divided that into several questions and subcategories, and those are what you see is what you get improvements. So make it easier, more transparent what is happening on the payment schedules. We wanted to automate recurring payment collection, and we will share about that as well. That's currently in pilot. We want to be clearer how to handle data changes when you're running payment schedules, especially larger ones that take more time. But we didn't start that yet. And lastly, but definitely not least, we want to help you get an insight into the data that is needed to run valid payment schedules, but also validate that in runtime. Two out of those 4 questions were pilots, and just to make sure that we all are on the same page, their pilot for us means that it's still early stages in case of the maturity of the feature. So we are working with a selected group of customers to test and to see if the product that we are building is solving the problems that you have, and if it's giving enough value for both you and for FinDock as the company. And if that's the case, then we move from pilot to beta, where we will be available to all customers, but still in beta phase, before moving to generally availability, being officially part of the FinDock product. Before we go into and talk about the pilots, first let's get back to the payment schedule enhancements, and also those are also already part of the payment schedule. Those are GA and already available to everybody. This is a slide from the last release where we show to you the payment schedule and then the payment schedule path, right? That shows all these steps and everything that's happening around the payment schedule, and all the improvements we made there to make it easier and cleaner for you to understand what is happening. So there was an auto refresh button. We showed less stages if those stages were not applicable. And when there was a processing hub process running, we've created a mini tile showing you inline the updates and the status of the processing hub process underlying that payment schedule. Now, with this release, we continued down that path, and we made several more experience improvements to the payment schedule and the payment schedule path layout. And I want to highlight a few to you. So the first one is there's better handling now of errors in the generate step of a payment schedule. So when there are installments with the status error attached to your payment schedule, we will highlight that to you. And we will make sure that before you continue to the next phase, those are resolved and that it's clear what is the scope of the payment schedule and what will be part of the collection process that's being kicked off. Then the second improvement we made is that we are running batch apex for certain steps in these payment schedules, right? But for lots of processes, say for example converse processes, but also gift date or bugs, we are running multiple batch apex jobs in serial, so one after the other. But we were also always showing only the detailed view of the first one. And with this release, we now show you the different batch apex jobs that we are running in the right order. And when you open them, you can see the details per job that is running to give you a true insight in what has happened or is happening in this certain step. To complete this, we also we reviewed and updated all the tooltips for all the payment schedule fields that are part of the FinDock packages. And we packaged those as part of a new Lightning record page. It's not a default, but if you want to, you can update your Lightning record page for payment schedules to the FinDock packaged Lightning record page. And that also makes use of dynamic forms, meaning that it only shows fields that are relevant to you. So for example, when you're collecting credit cards via Stripe, for example, we don't need the collection date field, so we won't show it to you. And last, but definitely not least, there still is a validation rule on the collection date field, making sure that the collection date field is in the future. And that's a very important rule for certain processes, but it wasn't correct in all cases. So we refined the criteria of that rule to make sure it's still adding value, for example, in the SEPA direct debit process, but it's not in the way for other processes where this is not relevant. And then this concludes all the updates we made over a couple of releases to our payment schedule, making sure that what you see is what you get, right? Giving you an insight into what is happening behind the scenes when I run a payment schedule. Now, the next step for us would be that we take all these learnings and these things that we've learned, and we want to bring that experience to the mandate schedule as well. I'm not sure when we are going to be able to release the first steps of that, but we are definitely keen to also upgrade the mandate schedule with the same experience and learnings in mind. The second item we want to highlight for this release is the auto collect pilot for recurring payments. And what we are doing as part of that pilot is we are removing the need for you to having to run an ongoing payment operation every month or every week, having to create and manage these payment schedules. So what we're aiming to do is giving you the ability to automatically collect your recurring payments using FinDock. And the way we do that is by becoming customer of our own tool. So we are still making use of payment schedules. We are just operating them automatically in the backend. Because we see when we look at customers that the activities that you do to collect your recurring payments typically are very stable month over month or week over week. And especially the part for the initial collection, when you do your big direct debit run or when you collect your cards or your PayPal payments, for example, we see that the initial payment is month over month the same. And with this pilot, we are able to automate that part for you. Now, how that works is we want you to be able to configure once, so only initial configuration is required, and then collect continuously. And the way to do that is we are making use of the recurring payment schedule. So you have to configure in FinDock once how you want to do your periodic collection, and then every period we are able to collect on your behalf. The only thing you then still have to do, obviously, is in the case of an exception or a failure, you have to manage that, right? When for example, a card is expired, etc. Now, let me show you that. Here I have a FinDock environment that is configured. This is my personal demo environment, and we are in the FinDock setup page, right? So the first thing we need to do in order to set up this pilot is we need to schedule the FinDock heartbeat, which we will address later in the webinar what that is. But it's basically, or essentially, a recurring scheduled Apex job. Then now that we have set that up, we need to tell the system which payments we want to collect automatically, and you do that on the payment method. So I've got a lot of processors and payment method in this environment, but for this demo we will use the direct debit collection, where we generate the SEPA files for you, and you can do that. We've added to the payment method screen, we've added an auto collect toggle. And per payment method that is recurring, you can put this auto collect toggle to true or to false. And when it's true, we will automatically collect the payments of that payment method for you. So for in this case, for direct debit, we have turned it true. And now the second configuration step we need to do is we need to tell the system what is our collection rhythm or pattern. And for that, we are going to create a recurring payment schedule. Now, we see different collection rhythms per customers, right? So there's monthly, there are situations where you say we do a monthly collection, for example, the 14th of every month. There's customers who collect weekly or even daily. And all these options you can configure in the recurring payment schedule. But for this example, we will do monthly. Now, first, we need to give it a name. So we call it the May release demo. And then the second thing we need to fill in, we need to say how to create this true. Because maybe you know, but the recurring payment schedule is already part of the FinDock system, but so far it was able to generate payment schedules, well, beforehand, essentially, but not automatically on a recurring basis. And now you can say auto create is true, and we select the right payment method. So in this case, we say SEPA direct debits for a certain bank account, let's say my ING bank account. And then we need to fill in, okay, how do you want to collect monthly then? Well, we want to collect starting from today, and for example, every month. Then it asks you, how do you determine which day of the month? Is that a specific date? Is it, for example, the first Monday or the last Friday? Well, we say, with our business, we always want to collect on the 8th of every month. So if we want to collect on the 8th of every month, for SEPA, that means we want to run our payment schedule one day before. But if you want, well, there's different configurations here, obviously. And then we want to select all installments in the system up until that collection date, but you could also choose until the end of the month. Now we know what to do, and when we hit save, we have a record in the system that says we want to collect our SEPA direct debits on the 8th of every month. Now this auto collect feature, we run that every night for you. So every day of the year, we check in the night, do we need to do something? And obviously we cannot wait until it's 3 a.m. So let me run on a different screen a bit of code for you that essentially simulates that it's 3 a.m. I just did, and now, so it's 3 a.m. we check the recurring payment schedules, and now when we open the related tab, we see that the payment schedule has been created for today, the run date 7th of May. And then when we open that, we not only see that this payment schedule has been created, but it's also automatically run by the system because the auto collect toggle is true. So here you can already see that, let me hit auto refresh and show details, that we first generated the scope of this payment schedule and we found one installment. And now, secondly, we are running a process where you can see now the nice mini tile where we are creating the SEPA file for you. Now, for file-based processes like this, we present the file to you and then obviously we stop because we cannot bring it to the bank for you. But when you were collecting your direct debits via, for example, Go Cardless or Stripe or Smart Debit, then this would have been a fully automated process, end-to-end collecting your payments. So let's recap. What we did is we set up the recurring payment schedule, highlighting to the system that we wanted to, how we wanted to collect on a regular basis. And for certain payment methods, we said we want to do that automatically. And by doing that, FinDock is able to do that automatically on your behalf, creating automatically the right payment collection files for you, or in the case of payment service providers integrations, automatically updating the payment service provider and doing this process end-to-end. Now this will work, or this works now for several customers already in pilot in production for all recurring payment methods of FinDock. So when you're interested and you think this would also be really nice for us, or when you have a specific question about the use case or how that would fit for you, please don't hesitate to contact us. We are very keen to learn, what resonates, and if we can work with you to bring this feature forward. Now there's a specific question from Chris that I also now then wanted to address, and Chris is asking, when you're automatically running the payment schedules, how do you work in case of, for example, a banking holiday in the UK? Now, you can set it up as part of the recurring payment schedule, Chris, and say we want to create a payment schedule for on a holiday, say it's a Boxing Day, second day of Christmas, then obviously that doesn't work. So next to the auto create checkbox, there's two more fields called conflict resolvement strategy, where you can say if there's a conflict because it's a non-business day, do you then want to take the previous day or a day later, etc., etc. So that will be taken care of automatically as well. All right. The second pilot that I want to talk to you about and share you about is the payment collection data validation pilot. Because especially when you are, well, I think we all know that when you're doing substantial recurring payment collection, then there's a lot of data that is needed in order to do that correctly month over month. And the data that is needed differs greatly per process, right? Collecting a SEPA direct debit has different data requirements than collecting a BEX direct debit or collecting a recurring credit card via a GEN. And therefore, we are launching, or we are actively piloting with a pilot called data validation, payment collection data validation, where we build rule sets for all the recurring payment methods in the system, where we basically configure and outline to you what are the requirements for that specific process. So we say this field is required, but that field can only be of a certain length, etc., etc. And then we do two things with those rule sets. The first thing is they are great for documentation, right? So they are outputting a description, and in this case now a sheet where you can see what are the data requirements for a specific process, and we hope that helps you migrate data in the system that is right the first time. But secondly, we also ship a Lightning component that is part of the payment schedule that you can validate the data that is attached to that payment schedule and the payment schedule itself in runtime with those rules. So when you're collecting your BACS direct debit run, you can validate before you hit process, you can hit validate, and we can together check if all the data requirements that are needed are checked. And this gives you the confidence that you're able to run without fault or exception. And we are able to spot the errors early and very specifically. Now we demoed this as part of the April release. And if you are interested in that, I encourage you to go to our YouTube channel and to check that, where Lawrence gave a very nice demo of how that would work, or how that works in your Salesforce environment. The main message here is that when we launched that in the April release, it was only available for SEPA direct debits, for payment schedules collecting SEPA direct debits, where we created the pain files. But with this release, there will be many more payment methods available to you that you can use to validate your data with. So we will also be able to validate our BACS direct debits via the different processes that we offer, so via Stripe, or the manual, or the Smart Debit, where Smart Debit is the processor. The Swiss direct debits, both LSV and Swiss direct debit from Post Finance, and credit cards collected via either Xserve or Stripe. Now, in the future, we hope to migrate the other rule sets as well. So if you have a use case that is time dependent on this, feel free to highlight that to us, so we are able to accommodate your timelines in our release planning. Now, we have received from our SEPA customers a lot of feedback about the rules and the functionality, and we're really happy with that because, well, it's addressing a need, apparently. And we've also learned from our SEPA customers that you all have your own ways already of validating a payment schedule. That could be a Salesforce report, that could be a formula field, etc., etc. So if you have already found your own way to validate your payment schedules, we are very interested in learning how you do that, and then what you validate exactly, to make sure that our rule sets model those validations as well, so that we are able to get the best validation possible for you and the other customers. Now, you can already do this, right? So there's a payment Lightning component that you can put either on the payment schedule and the installment layout, and that runs this validation automatically for you. So please, if it's not already on your layout, and for example, you're a UK-based customer, put it on your installment and payment schedule layout. Use it. It doesn't change any functionality, so you can just do it in production. It's not interfering with anything. It's not modifying your data. It's just highlighting potential errors to you. And if you find, if you have feedback, please don't hesitate to share that with us. And we will take that very seriously, and every release try to upgrade this functionality. All right, then I want to highlight a couple of enhancements or bug fixes that we made in this release. And the first one is the FinDock setup assistant. So in FinDock, we have our setup page for admins, where you can configure your FinDock setup. And we have introduced on the top a part of the layout we call the FinDock setup assistant. And the FinDock setup assistant is there to highlight potential problems with your FinDock setup to you. At the moment, there's 4 checks we are doing with the setup assistant. We are checking for the heartbeat, which we'll talk about in a minute. We are checking for your remote site settings. We are checking whether or not the web app is connected, and whether or not there's a value set for your default source. Because we think that all FinDock customers should have these 4 things in place to have a solid setup. If all these 4 checks are okay, you won't see the FinDock setup assistant, because otherwise it will be highlighted to you. And we want to use this pattern to, in the future, obviously add more checks to this, making it easier for you to find potential issues with your FinDock configuration, if there are any. Then a second enhancement we made is, as you know, part of FinDock is, for several parts of our system, we have scheduled Apex jobs doing, for example, daily or for a certain interval work. And we want to avoid the situation where you have to schedule multiple Apex jobs for different purposes. So with this release, we have introduced what we call the FinDock heartbeat. In the demo, you saw me already scheduling it. And what it does is every hour it beats. And it looks at custom settings. And if there's it looks at custom settings. And if there's a job to be executed based on the configuration in the custom settings, it's going to be executed. So for example, for the auto collect pilot, we want to check at 3 a.m. every day, do we need to run payment schedules? The heartbeat does that. But in the future, similar to the setup assistant, we want to use this pattern to move more jobs that are now have to be scheduled separately to the heartbeat, to make it very easy and consistent for you to debug and to set up all the recurring jobs we need at FinDock. Then there's still a couple of bug fixes and enhancement or smaller enhancements we made to several packages. As usual, those are grouped for the different packages that they impact, right? So when you're not using PayPal, then the PayPal changes don't apply to you. There's one specific one we'd like to highlight, and that has to do with guided matching. Because in guided matching, you cannot do roll-up summary fields on transaction set, right? So when you load in your bank statement file, you get the transaction set and underneath transactions. Now, all our customers want to understand from the transaction set how many transactions are there per status, etc., so that they can see very easily how much work there's still to be done on a certain transaction set. But this was really hard due to us not supporting roll-up summary fields on transaction set. Now we cannot support roll-up summary fields on transaction sets due to technical limitations. But what we're doing now with the heartbeat is every night we are updating transaction sets with summary fields. So you get a near real-time figure saying, hey, there's still X from, I don't know, 102 records with the status guided review, for example. Now, if you don't want to wait if the night has passed, we get that. So when you open a transaction set, you can also hit recalculate, and the instantly recalculates the summary fields of that specific transaction set. And thereby we hope to make it easier for you and your customers to operate transaction sets in combination with summary fields. As usual, please refer to our release notes for more details and a detailed rundown of all the changes that we've made to our system. If there are any questions, you know where to find us. And if you want to share this webinar with, for example, other people in your company, colleagues, or etc., then please find us on YouTube where we upload these, and subscribe to our channel, which really helps us. That being said, thank you for your time and attention today again. I will stick around to answer potential questions about the release or other feedback. And if you don't have any, then thank you for joining and enjoy your weekend.